Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Junkies Podcast. If this is your first time here, welcome to the show. If you're an avid listener, welcome back, and thank you for your continued support. If you're enjoying these episodes, please feel free to share them on your social media page. I'd also appreciate it if you would rate the show on iTunes and Spotify. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite downloader app so you never miss an episode. I release episodes every Monday, and today is no exception. Joining me this week is
Gerald W. Brister.
Gerald's been in the welding industry for over 47 years and has held multiple positions as a welder, an inspector, and most recently, an educator. He's got a lot of great stories to share in this episode. Several of y'all reached out to me and recommended Gerald as a guest on the show, and I was finally able to track him down and chat with him. Gerald is a wealth of knowledge and recently created an Instagram account and a YouTube channel. Be sure to give him a follow on Instagram and subscribe to his channel on YouTube. We'll get right into the show after a quick word from our supporters, as well as some special event announcements. Today's episode of the Junkies Podcast is brought to you by Outlaw Leather, a family-owned custom hood and leather welding accessory company based in Pasadena, Texas. Outlaw has everything you need as a welder to help you stand out and get the job done. They specialize in quality and hand-build each custom piece to order right there in their shop. Whether you're in the market for a welding hood, rod pouch, or an armband for pipe welding, or you're an iron worker that needs a custom tool belt, bolt bag, sleever bar holder, or pig ears, Outlaw's got you covered. If you're looking for custom pieces, just shoot them an email, info@outlawleatherllc.com, and they'll build your custom pieces to your exact specifications using your original designs or artwork. Maybe custom isn't your thing, or you just need to get some gear in a hurry. Not a problem at all. You can shop outlawleather.com directly and get fast, easy shipping right to your home or your shop. And as a listener of Junkies Podcast, you can save 15% off all in-stock handmade leather goods when you use Junkies in the discount box at checkout. And if you're local to Pasadena, just stop in their storefront and they'll treat you like family. Tell them the Junkies sent you. We're also brought to you by Fronius USA. Fronius is thrilled to announce 2 new products to unleash your welding potential. First up is the Fronius Dual Wire Feeder. The new WF25i gives welders the freedom to have 2 torches ready to go, each with different wire types, different welding parameters, diameters, and easily switchable at the touch of a button. No need to change wire spools or consumables between applications. Get precision wire feeding and save time without adding complexity to your day. Next up is the new mobile fume extraction system, Exento. The Exento comes in both high vac and low vac versions to fit your specific welding needs. The low vac system includes a flexible extraction arm with 360 degrees of rotation and a flow optimized hood for an exceptional fume capture rate. The high vac system combines perfectly with the Exento torch kits to remove more than 99.9% captured fume particles at the arc to provide excellent extraction in a compact unit. Come experience both product lines at FabTech this September in Chicago. And while you're at the booth, be sure to stick around for daily machine giveaways, guest appearances, welding presentations, and of course the opportunity to weld on-site with a wide range of Fronius products. We're also brought to you by Rockmount Research and Alloys. By now, you no doubt know about Rockmount's awesome rods and wires for dissimilar metals, welding through hydrocarbons, and getting higher performance at lower amps, but that's not where Rockmount's catalog ends. They have everything you need for all of your fabrication and repairs, like laser best drill bits, cut-off wheels, flap discs, hard rocks, drill bits, threaded inserts, stud extractors, reamers, and more. This is top quality stuff. I've used several of their burrs and grinding discs, and they all perform great. One of my favorite wheels that they put out is the PSP. It's specifically designed to prep, shape, and polish with one wheel. This disc is ideal for going from weld to paint with one wheel. No more swapping out different grits to get to a paint-ready surface. Just use one of these bad boys. And right now, you can save 10% when you shop for all your metalworking abrasives and consumables when you go to rockmountwelding.com and use ArcJunkies10 at checkout. Get the job done right the first time, every time with Rockmount. We're also brought to you by Underground Metalworks. Unleash the power of welding with Underground Metalworks in Orlando, Florida. Whether you're a newbie or a pro, get hands-on with our short-term welding training. We offer small class sizes with a 5-to-1 student-to-instructor ratio. Dive into our week-long comprehensive course or opt for an evening and weekend session. Master the art of stick, MIG, and TIG welding in no time. Classes are affordable, expert-led, and tailored just for you. Visit undergroundmetalworks.com today to see a full list of classes, schedules, and prices. We also offer corporate training to bring your team up to par to knock out that next big job. Ignite your passion with Underground Metalworks. All right, everyone, FabTech is just around the corner, and if you're planning to attend, there's a couple after-hours events that I wanted y'all to know about. Join me and a few of my friends Sunday, September 10th from 7 to 10 p.m. at Hard Rock Cafe, Chicago. This event will be hosted by some of the biggest names in the industry, to include Weld Porn, Blue Demon, Outlaw Leather, O2 Armor, Up and Smoke Welding Apparel, Kalos, Fronius, Flametech Scorpion, Weld Metals Online, Arc Junkies Podcast, Underground Metalworks, and Southern Weld Company. Then, on Tuesday, September 12th at Fat Pour Tap Works, you can join me and Stephanie Hoffman for the American Welding Society's Arcs and Ales networking event. If you've ever been to an Arcs and Ales event, you already know you don't want to miss it. Also, on September 30th, you can join me up in Green Bay, Wisconsin for VyperFest at Viper headquarters. VyperFest includes a car show, a burnout pit, private car detailing, and welding classes, and to wrap things up, a concert featuring Smoke Road and Our Last Night. Tickets are available at VyperFest.com. Just click on the link in the show notes. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Welcome to show number 290 of the Arc Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me today is Gerald W. Brister. Gerald, it is an honor and a pleasure to have you on the podcast, sir.
Well, you couldn't be more thrilled than I am. We spoke a little bit offline, and you were actually one of the first type podcasts. You were doing teaching videos, and I actually recommended you to a lot of my students. And I'm going to embarrass you here a little bit again because I am so pleased with what you do. I'm jealous of your youth. I'm jealous of your talent. And you are a man made to teach. As we talked about, it's not uncommon for men to know what to do in a trade, but they do not have a gift to teach it. And you have that gift, you have the knowledge, you have the personality. You're like on, and I'm very jealous. I'm proud to be here today.
That means a lot coming from you, sir. I really appreciate the compliment. I usually don't take compliments really well. I kind of get weirded out. I'm like, okay, thanks. I have no idea what to say, but I really appreciate that. Like I said, it means a lot coming from you. 'Cause, I mean, you've been in this industry. How long have you been in this industry? I know it's been quite a while because I was scrolling through your Instagram there, and I mean, you got photos that are black and white of you out there welding.
It's been a total of 47 years, and for about 44 of those years, I welded in one fashion or another, supervision. And then the last couple of years, I was an inspector for a gas company. And then for about a year, I was at Western Welding, and I taught for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of my background in general. I learned to weld first really offshore, and the offshore oil fields. That was my beginning for about 10 years. And got on the platforms and thought I was doing really good until some of my mentors were fixing to go on the pipeline barges that lay the pipelines in the Gulf of Mexico. And I found out it paid 67% more than on the platforms.
It's easy to jump ship at that point.
Oh, I'm done. But I did a video yesterday, actually. It's going to be posted here in a couple of weeks about that. And it has to do with first impressions and a lot of things I teach. And I was very fortunate, went down with them. And the guy said, you know what, son, I'm going to give you a shot. And then after that, worked in the Gulf of Mexico. The next big money, if you do that kind of work, is when you work overseas. And you would get a higher pay raise per hour. You would get a 33 to 30% bonus if you stayed your contract. You had to sign a contract. And that was the big time. And it was the same thing. I got all the breaks. It was a boom time in the oil and gas industry. So a young man could get a break. I was mentored by good people, and they told me how to behave and what to do. And I really just got sucked up with the times. Found out then I had a scuba background for different reasons, and found out one day that Halliburton Diving Division was looking for welders to weld underwater, to do not the wet welding. There's two kinds, people might know. One is welding in the water. It's like a low hydrogen welding rod. And the other is to make tie-ins on the ocean floor in a habitat, a building, say. And that paid a lot of money at the time. And so at that time, I had done a lot of things to risk my life. So I thought, well, this risking it for money might be a better way. So I did.
That's
And then
really
later
cool.
on, went into supervision, different things, pipeline on land. And now here I am today talking to you.
Man, now you said you started off welding on the oil platforms. I mean, what did you do to get to that? I mean, did you have formal training? Did you start off welding in a shop somewhere? I mean, how was that transition going from being on land to going off in the ocean on an oil platform out there welding?
Well, I'm from Louisiana, Texas originally. My father built interstate highways during the boom, and that was a pipeline boom after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Eisenhower did the interstate commerce thing. So we moved all over the greater Gulf South, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Arkansas. I mean, I fought my way all through the South, going to high school. And you imagine you go to 2 or 3 different schools a year, small towns where the interstates went. But in that area, when you want to go to college or you want to save money, the place to do it is to work offshore. You can be a roustabout, you can work on drilling rigs, you can work in welding crews. And the welding offshore is very similar to, say, like shutdown work in a refinery. These platforms, they'll drill wells, or maybe 5, 6 of them in a field, and it'll be like block such and such. The Gulf of Mexico, if you looked at one of the offshore maps, is in blocks. And each block has a number assigned to it, a grid. And it'll be block 200, Shell Oil Company, platform A, B, C, D, E. When you pull up in a crew boat, there's a big banner up there. It's on the heliport so the pilots know. And so you go out in the Gulf of Mexico and you make 84 hours a week minimum. So you get 44 hours a week overtime and cost you nothing. They feed just like being in the service.
Yeah.
It's exactly. Okay. Just like being in the Navy. 4 men to a room usually. They feed you. They wash your clothes. Somebody makes your room. So you can work a lot of hours and actually get more rest than you do on land because where you work is right where you're at. So I had some plans. I'd been profiled for different things, and I was considering some of them. One of them would have been to go to electronics school back then. And so I said, well, I'm going to go work offshore a little while, and I'm going to get some extra money. It was a 2-year school. So I wound up doing different things, but I eventually wound up in a welding crew. And a welding crew, just like the refinery work, they are either expanding a facility on one of those platforms, A, B, C, D platforms, the compressor platform that gathers all the oil and then compresses and sends it in through a pipeline to land. That's kind of the mechanism of how it works. And so I got out there with these welders and was making a lot of money. And I had done a little bit of welding in I don't know if it was an ag class, maybe in Texas in high school because we moved so often. Little knick-knack stuff. And one day I had some time. My job allowed me a little time. And I asked one of the fitters, they were fitting a 8-inch pipe down into the deck, the steel decks, a deck penetration. And they'll split it in half and put it back together so the oil and residue doesn't go in the ocean when you hose down the deck. And I picked it up and I don't know, within an hour, I was stacking dimes with a 3/16 rod around some 8-inch pipe on this deck. And it just was very natural. And I did some more, and I did some more that day. And one of the welders came up and he said, hey, son, he said, you need to forget that going to that electronics school. You need to come out here and weld with us. He said, you stick with us and you'll be wearing diamonds. So I kind of chuckled about it, but it went on. And then I saw something happen on the job. I saw how much power welders had when you have that welding test in the oil and gas industry. And I finally decided, I said, you know what? I think this is what I'm supposed to do. It was kind of like when you find out you have a gift you didn't even know you had.
Is that the story where I believe you mentioned it one time on one of the Instagram videos that I seen where the welders were holding the job up just because they had the power? Is that the same story?
I could tell you a lot of stories.
Okay.
But this particular story, we had a bad cook.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a crew of about 50 guys, welders, helpers, riggers. And I was still trying to decide this, and I'd go out there and weld at night a little bit. And the cook was really terrible. And when you do non-union work offshore, particularly welding, when you have a struggle going on or you have a point of contention, we'll pick someone to go speak for all of us. And so this guy, same guy, Bobby Lemons, he was a character from Texas. And everybody's complaining about the food. He said, well, it's not going to get any better. You guys don't do something. What do you want to do about it? And if you guys had enough, I'll go up there and we'll get this straightened out. So we went upstairs to where the Shell Oil project manager happened to be there that day, and about 4 or 5 supervisors in there. And we followed him up this stairs. It looked like a mob scene in a Western going to hanging. And he beat on that door of this place, and that guy opened that door, and they all 4 of them stepped back. And he said, food's no good, cook's no good. We've done told you about 3 times, and today's the day. You either have another cook here today by the time the sun goes down, or it's going to look like a suitcase parade leaving here, and you're not going to have anybody on this job. And they're like, okay. And about 2 hours later, I saw a chopper land. I saw a guy get off in cook's uniforms. I saw the other guy get on. And that night we had a good meal. And I'm thinking, wow, this is not too bad.
Yeah, you can't.
So that was one of the stories. Yeah.
I mean, it's really cool to see that, like, you guys had that much power back then. Because I mean, like, if the welders pack up and go home, like you said, suitcase parade, everybody's jumping out. They're bailing off. They're going to drag up and go somewhere else. The entire job shuts down. I mean, that's like a critical component of that entire operation for petrochemical. You know, whether it's power plants or, you know, chemical. The welders leave, you're high and dry.
Well, it's on land as well. But on a non-union job, that's how things go. We get together, we pick a spokesperson. We actually call it a wobble. On a union job, you would say, well, we're going to strike. And it takes different forms. That's basically what happens. When it finally gets to be enough, we sit around, we talk about it, pick a spokesman, and then they go deal with them, and then we back them up. And you have to back them up.
Mm-hmm.
And not every cause is just. I'm going to mention that in some videos. A guy had a good point. When you get that power, you got to use it well. It's like having a high caliber rifle, and you might be able to fire it 2 miles down range if you know what you're doing. But what are you going to hit when you get there? So it's kind of like that. But that was the norm. The welders backed welders up. And I'm getting feedback that it's not as much today as it used to be. It's still there, but it's going away like a lot of the old ways.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cause a problem for nothing, but when it comes time, you stick together. Now, during the last 3 years, when we had all the little medical upheavals, I saw something on video, and I believe it was a plant job, and it looked to me like welders and fitters got together, and they were wanting to cause them to have a little medical procedure they didn't want. And they finally kept telling them no. And finally the guy comes that day and he said, well, if you guys don't do this today, you're fired. And they had already talked about it because in the video, they just went and packed their junk up, locked their toolboxes, and they were headed to the parking lot. And an older guy, looked like a fitter, came back later and he said, we just found out today what happens when 80 people decide they're not going to do something. And the guy said, what's that? And he said, we didn't do it and we're not going to do it. So the cause has to be right. But it's always been the same in history. Good people have to stand together, and then you get a just dessert sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, it takes a mass of people to be able to do something like that. You can't just have one person. You know, I mean, you get the whole crew together. I mean, you got a problem on your hands. At that point, you got some leverage.
You got some leverage, and you want to use it righteously, but that's what I saw. This world is full of the pendulum. Things go too far one way, somebody's got too much power, then it goes the other way. So you need to have this equilibrium. I need a job. And you need to treat me with respect. And so when we come to a level deal here, that's a man deal, I call it. That's straight up, that's square, that's good. I need a job, you need me. Let's go on and get past this.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said after that you went over in Asia to do welding out there?
Well, I was on that job, decided to follow the welding. They got me past my first test. And back then, the welding test was good for 1 year. And it was for Shell Oil, where I happened to be. Their test was good for 1 year. It was 5P and LH. And back then, we didn't do the 45. We did the bell hole and horizontal test.
Okay.
And so I passed those. And I had a little trouble with beads at first. I could do the welding and the filling pretty good. And they were in a hurry to get me broke out. There was a lot of work trying to help me out. So they I got by the bead. And then I would practice, and I got better and better at it. But then my little mentors, they were pipeline guys as well. And when I met them, they were between pipeline jobs. And they were going to go to work on the lay barges that lay the pipelines between the platforms, and then they'll lay the pipelines into land to tie in. And that money paid a lot more. And I said, I want to get in on that. And they said, okay, we're going to go down here there's a company that did most of the overseas work around the world. Persian Gulf was J. Ray McDermott, and the other one is Brown and Root in that day and time. And so we're going down here with J. Ray McDermott. We're going to talk to such superintendent, and you come along with us, and we'll see if the guy will give you a shot at it. So we go down here to talk to this guy, and the video I'm talking about, I'm teaching about first impressions. You may know this. Most blue collar guys don't know this. White collar do. I'm kind of big into psychology. I have this weird INJ something personality. I was profiled, and I'm like 1 in 200, and so I'm very in tune to psychology and intuitiveness and things like that. And so people make a first impression about you in 0.7 to 7 seconds. Now, you can go to one study, may say a little more, a little less, but basically, people meet you and they get a first impression. And 75% of the time, they do not change their mind, whether they're wrong or whatever. So it's very important. And so they taught me early on, and they called it the law of first impressions. And they taught me I'm supposed to look like a welder. I'm supposed to behave this way, da-da-da-da-da. And so I mimicked them. I was smart enough and raised good enough in a small town. I have respect for people older than me. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. When I got in, I got in. So I dress like them, da-da-da-da-da. So we go down to the superintendent. I'm dressed like them. We all got starch khaki shirts on. We all got polished cowboy boots. We've all got white caps and these little Tom Waters pipeline glasses on. Only I'm the young guy. I'm the young guy. It's the only difference. So they're talking to him, and finally he said, they said, this is Gerald W. Brister. He said, it's the young man we were telling you about, and he wants to come out and break out on the pipeline work, on the lay barges. So the guy looks at me. He looked at me like I was a pretty girl, Jason. He started at my head where that white cap was, went down them glasses, went down to my boots. He came back up, and he's looking at me. And you've been in the Corps, you told me. And he looked just like a Marine Corps DI. Mm-hmm. He leaned over that desk, and he looked at me, and he said, son, do you really think you can do this? He said, it's not slow like on them platforms. You're fixing to step up in the big time here. And I told him in one of the videos, you don't want to be arrogant, but confidence is attractive.
Yes.
And I had been taught that, right? So I took about a half step forward and I challenged him. And I said, yes, sir, I do. And he looked at me for a minute and he said, all right, boy, I'm going to give you your shot at the big time. And I made the test and I was able to hang. So that's how I went up on lay barges. Then I found out within the company, they were looking for welders to go overseas, and they worked all over the world at that time. Africa, Asia, the North Sea was starting to go really big. And so I took a job with McDermott as well. And then later on some other companies over the years.
Yeah, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. I always used to tell my students that. And then when you roll up there, you want to be confident, not cocky. You want to be confident in your abilities, but if you're cocky, people can sense that right away. And like you said, about 0.7 of a second, they can kind of figure out what you're about just based off body language, how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you talk, all that stuff. And a lot of that you can't hide. You know, there's a lot of people out there that use that adage, you know, fake it till you make it. There's certain people you're not going to be able to pull the wool over their eyes or BS them for too long before they figure you out.
No, and if you're a young person, I taught in my classroom about the first impressions. I mean, it's more than we can talk about here. But they got it. And I said, you're going to be trying to get a job from somebody that's about your mom and daddy's age. Foremans are about 40s, superintendents are about 50s, and the project guys are older, generally. And I said, their drug of choice is alcohol, and they may get drunk every night, but they're conservative. And so if you go over there and you're not conservative, they're going to smell it on you pretty soon. That's our little club here. And good or bad, right or wrong, that's who it is. That's who's in this business. And if you go there too confident, you look like a cocky little punk. Mm-hmm. That's what I told him. And I said, you guys get me? Yes, sir. I said, all right. Enough said. You want to be confident, but you don't want to be too much, because then we look at you like, oh, yeah, here's a wannabe.
Yeah, you can't teach nothing to a know-it-all.
No, sir, you cannot.
Yeah, I've had some of those students in my class. It's like, why are you even bothering to show up here? You know, if I can't teach you nothing, if you know more than I do, why are you wasting your time here with me?
Well, you may get a chuckle if you get time when you're bored. I put a video up last week. I think it's still up, I'm sure. And I was talking about just that. A helper I had one time that was the boss's son. And
I remember. I watched that story. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. So you get it exactly.
Oh yeah. But I mean, half the time the boss knows, like, this kid can't hold a job anywhere. I better drag him to work. And then, you know, now they're arrogant and cocky because, oh yeah, this is my dad's job. And like, you can't run me off. Okay. Watch.
Yeah, exactly. So, we're on the same page. You're a lot younger than I am. And, but you know what, Jason? Right things don't go out of style.
That's true.
They do not go out of style. Nothing that is right and good ever goes out of style. And I was on a job in McDermott one time, and we were in the Bahama Islands. There's a big refinery there. We built some superport loading sites and laid pipeline in. And every night we could go to town if we wanted to the casinos. And we decided, one night we're going to go to town. So we're going to go down there, we're going to drink, we're going to gamble, we're going to dance with the girls. So we go down there and we're coming back about 3 hours before shift. Everybody's kind of half lit up. I was tired. And we had two guys that were on our crew that were pretty much professional gamblers, but I guess they fell in hard times, and they'd been pipeline welders, and they knew the big shot from McDermott. And so he put them on this job. It's going to be about a 2-month job. So we're coming back on this little crew boat, and I was the next to the youngest guy there. There was one guy younger than me, and we're sitting on these benches that faced each other in this crew boat. And I don't know what started it, but the young guy got into it with these two gambler guys, and they were in their late 40s, maybe early 50s. And he was complaining about how much money he had lost gambling. And they listened to him, and finally one of them said, "You know what your problem is, son?" He said, "You went against the odds and hoped you're going to win. We go with the odds, and we mostly win." Well, the kid got mad, and he said, "Well, yeah, you're out here. You must not be doing too good." He said, "We're in a little dry spell." He said, "Let me tell you this. You ought to see the house I live in. You ought to see the car I drive, and you ought to see my girlfriend." And everybody started laughing. Well, I didn't forget that. I was about half lit up, and I got back to the bars, and before I went to sleep on my bed, I found a piece of paper, and I wrote that down. Go with the odds. Well, what are the odds? The odds are the things that are traditional and work, and first impressions would be one of them. I never forgot that. Go with the odds.
That's the same thing. Like, I would explain to my students, like, the quality of a proper handshake. You get a lot of people now, they want to do the fist bump or the elbow bump. Not like, call me old school or whatever, but like, you can tell a lot about a person's demeanor and character right off the rip with a handshake.
Oh my goodness, yes. And the only thing I think I did a little video at Western about that one time. And that's what I was talking about there. I said, when I was a boy, we were taught how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens today is young boys, they're trying to do the right thing, and they overhand shake. You ever got one of those?
Oh, yeah. They're up and down
like
all over the place.
Well, that or in the course, somebody's trying to arm wrestle you,
mm-hmm.
and they're trying to show off how tough they are. And that's not right either, unless you want to be offensive and make a point. So they just don't know. And either that or that limp hand shake, man, that dead fish hand
Oh, yeah,
shake.
cold fish, yeah.
Oh, my goodness,
that
cold fish. Yeah.
Look somebody in the eye. Like, if you're going to shake somebody's hand, like, look them in the eye. That says a lot about you. It says a lot about your character. And it's something that's, you said, like, the true things, they don't go away. I think that's something it's slowly shifting. I taught my son this, the importance of a handshake. Firm grip, look somebody in the eye, and, you could tell a lot about somebody that way.
Oh, you can, absolutely. And but then I was joking with them, too, and I said, it's about 2 seconds. And that is, if you go look the science up, that's what they tell you, about 2 seconds. And that's about right. Anything more than that, then you need to live in Northern California, and I don't want to live there, so I'm done with that. No more than 2 seconds.
I got a good buddy up in Northern California. He's like Janesville area. Damn good welder. But he lives up like out in the mountains away from everybody. He's got pictures on his Instagram. He's out there welding parts and pieces up, and he's got deer walking into his shop, just kind of checking in on them and stuff.
It is. You wouldn't know, the left coast out here, everybody makes fun of, but when you get up in Northern California and Southern Oregon, there's nobody there.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody there. It's a totally different world.
Yeah, Hank wrote a song about that one.
Yes.
North California and South Alabama.
Yeah.
So when you went through, because you did quite a bit of welding and everything, you mostly in petrochemical?
Mostly. I've done a little bit of everything. I learned to TIG weld. It's not my specialty, and I probably haven't touched a TIG torch in 20 years or more. Because the hyperbaric welding, that was the procedure back then. That process was in its infancy, probably been going on about 6 years, 7 years, and that was their procedure. You would TIG the beads, and then you would LH the rest. And now I learned this within the last year. We could only go to 1,000 foot. That's the training I took. That was like the edge of the earth where you fall off. Mm-hmm. And now they go to 10,000. And the videos I watched, when they're inside the habitat, they're not wearing their helmets or anything. So it's an all TIG process now. So you don't have that smoke. And I'd actually be curious to know what they're doing now because it's so much more far advanced.
I would
But that's
imagine
how I learned how to TIG weld.
they're probably running like the orbital TIG systems and everything, I would imagine. I know they
I
started
don't know.
doing
I
that
don't
on a
know.
lot of the low hydrogen critical stuff. They're just doing strictly, they'll set it up with the orbital TIG welder, and they'll run that root in there, and then they'll do a hot pass and fill and cap. And I mean, you got a guy in there with a little, teach pendant and a little visor and stuff. He just checks on it and makes sure, everything's running correctly. And it's got a cold wire fed process that's continuously feeding into the puddle. It's pretty slick.
Oh, I bet it is. I see a lot of stuff. It's outside of my world. I know about it, and if somebody explains it to me, I get it. But back then that's how it was. It was the TIG roots, and then you would line the pipelines up, and then you would set your habitat, your house over it, and it was a big framework, and it had like the clamshells at the arcade.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be four of them, two at each end of this framework, two next to your habitat, and you would hook onto them, and that's how you got a lineup. You could hydraulically maneuver them from side to side. And then once you got it in there, you got a measurement, and you called topside and gave them that measurement, and they would cut one of the pipes and send it down a pump, and you wrestle it in place, and then you would weld it. But the pipe you cut inside was with that, was it wax machine, W-A-C-H? I forget now.
Okay.
And it was on a chain drive, and it would go around with a diamond hard blade then, and it would bevel and cut the pipe. So you had two of your pipe ends would be magnetized, and the two on the pump weren't. And that was pretty exciting with a TIG rig, trying to get a bead in that until you got some heat on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, just preheat or whatever, get the magnetism out, or did you have to, do you have a degassing device down there? Or?
No, you just weld it. But after you weld on it, the heat itself would dissipate it.
Okay.
And but anyway, that's how it was then. But now it's much more sophisticated.
Okay,
so that's how I got into that.
Have you? I mean, you've been around the world. You've been doing this stuff for a while. When you get magnetized pipe, how true is it? Like a lot of the old timers, they would smack the pipe with a hammer. They'd hit it with a sledgehammer.
I've heard that. I've never seen it done. Now, there's a certain way you wrap the electrodes. You bring an extra welding machine out to the pipeline. And nobody ever does it right because everybody forgets it because they don't do it all the time. And that's, well, how many wraps was that? Which direction? And so we'll screw around out there forever. And then finally I just weld it. Also out of England now, I've watched online, there's a vendor that makes one that looks really good. It's very expensive, I was told. And they wrap a lead a certain way, hit that button, it zaps it, and it's just like you're welding on nothing that's magnetized. If you're welding, making a tie-in on pipelines that's magnetized, and they get magnetized because of the flow through them and different things, the electrolysis for corrosion. And one will be magnetized, one won't, because you're cutting a section and putting it in. So the section being put in is not magnetized. I'd have to show you, and I'm planning on making some videos if I get to do what I want. And what you do is you're arm wrestling the magnetized side. So it can't be real cold, and so you're going to run a downhill route. You don't drag it like you normally would because you'll get non-fusion all in that sidewall. The magnetism of the pipe is pushing the liquid metal away as you're running your route. So that's why I call it arm wrestling. If you just try to drag it, it's going to fuse, not fuse, and you're going to have repairs. The way to do it is we call it like stepping, stitching. Welders, use different terms for that. And what you want to do, you want to go in to the magnetized side of the pipe, roll it around to the non-magnetized because it's going to fuse very easily. Come out and go back again. Kind of like you're doing an uphill.
Mm-hmm.
You want to push into the magnetized side with enough strength, enough amps, and you're just making a little spot at a time and get out of it and come back a spot. If you'll do that, you can back weld it out of there.
Okay.
And the bottom's always the hardest place for undercuts. So you want to start on the top and work your way to the bottom. By then, the heat's got a lot of it out. And to your point, if the inspector is a welder and he kind of knows what's what, he'll let you put some heat on it a lot of time too.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm assuming you run like a 60-10 or an 80-10 when you were running that route?
Yes, sir. Most time it's 60-10. You have to be on a really hard pipe to get it where you run the roots with the 80-10. A lot of time, the weld is supposed to be stronger than the pipe, but in some procedures, they'll let you use the 60-10 on pipe that's harder than that, X65, because of the undercutting. The stronger rod, 70-10, 80-10, will undercut the root a lot of times, particularly in the bottom.
Okay. And
so they'll let you put the 60-10 root in, and then you'll grind it. And then you'll put a downhill pass in it with the 70 or 80-10. And if you do it right with a 532 rod, then you're burning most of that 60-10 out. You're getting right down there to where the bevels meet. And so you get a good tie in there at the edges on the toes. And welders like to use 3/16. That's how we like to cheat from way back when. You can hot pass farther with that 3/16 and go faster, go hotter. But it's more of a filling pass than a hot pass. Now they really want you to take that small 532, want you to burn into that root and pretty much weld all of it out.
Okay, yeah, because you're kind of like pushing in on that root pass. Kind of like
Yes,
you said, getting rid of everything.
You're going to get rid of the slag, but they want to, the old timers called it stirring the puddle. So if you were using a old Shield Arc 85 and you were welding on some pipe and it was hard to make them fuse right, and so they called it stirring.
Okay.
So you want to be hot enough, and it's kind of like a pool cue, like this, a sewing machine on an angle. I pull back, I push in, and you want to be hot enough that liquid melts into the sidewalls, gets the wagon tracks out, but it also digs about an 1/8 inch. Most downhill welding penetrates about an 1/8 inch in the parent metal. And the HYP rods, 7010s, we call them. We called them hippie rods back in the hippie days they came out, but it really stood for high yield pipe, Lincoln. It was when the pipes got harder, the rods had to get harder. But a hippie rod digs a little deeper than the 8010s. But that's about what you're digging. So after a while, by experience, you know how far you're digging into that. So you're burning that inferior 6010 out against a harder pipe.
I got you.
Like that.
Yeah, they still call it hippie rod. And I didn't know what hippie rod was, because I got an ironworker background. And when I was with Weld.com, we went down to WeldTube, or South Coast Welding Academy, to shoot some videos. And I got to hang out with Jacob Schofield and Bob Moffitt and Travis Fields, like these pipe welding legends. These guys are really good. And didn't know anything about pipe welding, so I'm looking in, I'm watching, listening to the different terminology. I mean, they speak like welders, but a little bit different. And that's one of the things they were talking about is hippie rod. And I was like, hippie rod? And I was like, what's hippie rod?
Oh, they were a great rod. I'm just old enough. That hippie rod was still out being used. Lincoln came out with it, and here's a little trivia for you. And it had asbestos in it, and the flux.
That ain't good.
And that was the best welding rod I have ever welded with in my life since. It would run really crisp and straight when you carried a puddle. The edges of your cap were straight. You pretty much just had to just hold it in place and go down the side of the pipe. It ran with a hotter arc, and to trap slag, you just had to be an idiot. I don't know what you had to do to trap slag with it. But they found out it had asbestos in it, and everybody freaked out. So then overnight, Lincoln had to get rid of that, right? And they came out with the new hippie. It's kind of like when I was young and you had the original Coca-Colas and the little short bottles. And it was like drinking whiskey when you were a kid. Who could drink the most Coke straight? Okay, burn your throat. Then they came out with Coke Classic and all that stuff, and it's never been the same.
Right.
Well, that's kind of how the hippie rod is. It's never been the same. And it started fingernailing really bad when they came out with the part 2 of it. And I was in a weld supply store one day, a friend on. I walked in, and there was this salesman there, and he points at me, and he said, "This guy can tell you." I said, "Tell me what?" And he said, "Well, I represent Lincoln, and we're trying to find out how you guys like the new hippie rod." And I said, "It's okay, I guess." I said, "Except for one thing." He said, "What's that?" I said, "You need to bend those 50-pound cans at a 45-degree angle right from the factory, because that's how they weld." Fingernail all over the place. And he said, "Oh, okay, thank you." But that's kind of what it was. They're bad to fingernail. The 8010s now don't do that. But they'll kind of burp on you every now and then, leave a little bug hole. So there's little nuances, just like for different rods.
What's the rod? Because Lincoln actually did that. They put a rod. It's not meant for restarts. You're not supposed to restart with it. But it's literally cut at a 45-degree angle, like how a rod will fingernail. It's made that way from the factory. Is that the new hippie rods?
I do not know. And I honestly,
I'm going to have to look it up, because
I was joking with the guy.
No, but I've seen those. It's actually got like a 45 or a tapered edge. It might not be 45, but it's a tapered edge at the beginning. And you're not supposed to do like stops and starts and all that stuff with it. So if you extinguish one rod or you get stuck, you break it off, chip it, clean it, whatever, grind it back out, and then you start with a brand new rod. But I want to say it's got like a tapered end on it.
Huh, I did not know that. I'll have to look into that. You got me very curious. I'm half Cajun. Cajun's got a big curious, so now you made me curious.
Okay. Now, do you prefer go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, do you prefer the 5P rods or the 5P plus? Because I know there's a big debate on that. Like a lot of the old hats, they like the classic 5P, but Lincoln went in and messed up a good thing, allegedly. But I've met just as many people that like the 5P plus.
Well, you're exactly right. About the time I broke out is when they came out, probably a couple of years later, they came out with the 5P Plus, the gray rod. And before we had the red 5P. I just bought a welding machine and had it rebuilt. I bought an SA 200. I think it's a 76 model, but all the red faces, the 60s machines. And that's when the red rod was the rod, right? And pipe hadn't got so much harder yet that they had to go make a hippie or an 8010. So it was all around cowboy during the 60s. And that machine and those rods were like married in heaven. They are made for each other to make a weld where it stacks up real quick. You don't have to put as many passes. Makes a pretty cap. And then they came out with that 5P Plus, and we pitched a fit and we cried, and it looked like it was actually undercutting on the inside, but it was so fine, it's not. And now I don't think I could even run a bead with a 5P because it's like welding with bubble gum, and you got to get the heat way up. And the slag was hard to get off the 5P for the hot passes. And so, you've welded with a 5P Plus. That's what it was made for, beating hot passes. So I think it's far superior.
Yeah, because it was one of the. Oh, good.
If I had a welding school, I tried to buy some of that red 5P, and because I think it welds better, I was going to make some videos. And it was so dry, I think it had been setting up for a long time that it didn't weld good. But if they were as good as before, I would actually teach welding downhill with the red 5P before I would any of the others to get them going. I think it would be easier to learn.
Yeah, I could see that. Well, that you got to kind of figure out, you got to be able to finesse that rod a little bit more. I think the 5P Plus is a little bit more forgiving than the 5P. But I have heard you take that 5P, you dip it in water, and it activates the cellulose. I don't know exactly the theory behind it, but it burns a lot better if you put it in water.
Well, okay, here's the deal with that. The 5P was not so bad, but that trick has been around a long time. And it's not like dipping it in a bucket. What you do, your helper's got like a rag that's damp, wring it out. And before he hands you that rod, he hands you one rod, he should be reaching and getting another one like NASCAR, and it should be in his hand. And he should run it through that rag. And the cellulose rods require some moisture. That's why you're really not supposed to put them in over 100 degrees, I think.
Yeah, you don't put them in the rod oven. You bake everything out of them.
Yes, the Connex buildings, and they're in there all the time at 130 degrees. I've never seen an inspector yet that said, hey, you got to get them out of there.
Right.
But the rod that was the hippie rod, I'm telling you, the second generation one that didn't weld good. The first ones were just all around cowboy. So the second ones, they were a little dry, and they found out if we would wipe them in the rags when we were welding with them, they welded better. They settled down. They didn't fingernail as much. And so if there wasn't an inspector there that was really watching, or most of them don't even know, they wouldn't even know that unless they were a former pipeline welder, they made them weld better. So that's a trick for the hippie rods. And it takes you out of spec technically, but it makes it weld better. So yes, you're exactly right.
Now we were talking about magnetism. There was a guy I was reading through one of the posts on Facebook the other day, was welding up some stuff that was already magnetized. But one of the things you can do is run 7018 on AC. That AC will kind of disrupt that magnetism. But a lot of people are like, oh, yeah, you can't run 7018 on AC. But
you can do straight polarities. A lot of things you can do. You've seen the pipeline rigs, if you've ever been up close to them, and they use the green, call them T300 Lincoln holders, and they're bare on the end. They're kind of the old school. Now you have different ones. They're coming along just like different looking helmets and all that. But you'll see these pipeline rigs, and it looks like they have two positive holders instead of a ground. There's no ground. And there's different reasons for that, but the main one was years ago, if you were getting undercut on your roots, you could swap the polarity. And so you always use that holder as a ground. You familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what you do then, you just swap it back. And if you put a good hot pass in like you're supposed to on reverse, it makes a good weld. I've even seen gas companies that have a procedure for thin wall pipe for that very reason, and it actually is a straight polarity. But it's not supposed to penetrate as much and all that. It's a trick also if you're welding corral fencing, thin stuff at home. You put it on straight polarity, it doesn't dig as much.
Right. That's why, so with the 7018 on AC, that rod forever was just meant to be ran on reverse polarity. But I guess way back in the day when they came out the old Lincoln Tombstone, Lincoln said, I want one of these tombstones, one of these welding machines underneath every Christmas tree this year. And so I mean, they made that. They ran that facility day and night, cranking out these tombstones. They sold them in Sears and all these other department stores and stuff, and sold all these rods. But the problem was their number one selling electrode, which was the Lincoln 7018, you couldn't run it on that tombstone because that tombstone at the time was AC only. So the brains got together and they said, if we put some potassium inside of that electrode, it'll allow that arc to switch back and forth between positive to negative without extinguishing. So they put a little magic in there. They put some potassium in that electrode, and now you can run them on AC or DC reverse polarity.
Well, see, I came on your show today. See how young and smart you are. I just learned something.
Oh, see, I'm learning all kinds of stuff from you too. So it's only fair I share, a quirky little story and whatnot.
Well, I'm gonna steal it, but I'm gonna give you credit for it. I promise.
Okay, yeah, I got that one. My buddy Ryan Eubank. I went up to Lincoln. I got to see, what's that?
Ryan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody know. You know Ryan?
I spoke with him Sunday for a good while. Yes, I did.
Yeah, I wouldn't put.
We're not best friends. It's a little bit of a long story, but I spoke with him. Yeah,
Ryan's a good dude. You got to meet him in person. He's probably the main reason that I'm so passionate about welding, because when I first got into welding education, I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know how to teach. And I kind of learned that throughout, just going through, digging through information, because I didn't want to be wrong in front of my students. And I had a duty as an instructor to tell them the correct way of doing things. So I did a lot of research. Well, one of the things I did was I attended one of these Lincoln Electric advanced welding educator courses. And that's where I met Ryan Eubank. And he walked in and I was like, who is this guy? And he just oozes passion for this trade and passing it on to the next generation. And it's contagious. Like, I came back to the school with a purpose and a drive. And I mean, he had that effect on me. He's been a good friend and mentor ever since. I think I've went through 3 of his advanced educator workshops. And my school's like, why do you keep going back? You went to that class last year. Well, I'm sure they're going to teach some new stuff this year. Well, it's the same curriculum. I was like, you got to meet the guy teaching the class. And now he traveled around. He actually came down to Florida 2 years ago and did one at my school. And it was just an awesome event. He's such an awesome person.
Well, it's a bit of a story, and I don't want to talk too much about it right now, but I got to speak to him and a few other people on the line, and you are right. He came across that phone, very passionate. All of them did. All these people did, and they have a little bit of a dream, and I'm all for their dream. But yeah, that's very interesting that you know him that well, and I just spoke to him Sunday.
Yeah, he's a good dude. Next time you talk to him, tell him I said hi. I
surely will. I will.
Now, Gerald, when you were out in industry doing all this stuff, I mean, especially petrochemical, all that stuff, that business ebbs and flows. I mean, like, it's either feast or famine. I mean, construction is pretty much the same thing. What did you do during the times when work kind of dried up? Because I've heard, horror stories of welders having to sell their rig, their machine, tools, everything just to make ends meet at home. So I mean, how were you able to stay successful during those times?
It was kind of an interesting time because, there was a boom, and typically if you go research, oil boom and bust are about 7 years in the oil and gas industry. And sometimes it can vary because things are being manipulated a lot today. And that's a whole nother discussion. It's not normal. But it was bad. Fortunately for me, I had been broke out long enough when the real first bust came. We had 25% unemployment. And I mentioned it in a story here recently. That's the same unemployment as the Great Depression in oil, gas industry in Texas, Louisiana. And I remember the videos out in Odessa, Midland, Odessa, Texas, the Permian Basin. And there was just rows and rows of these work trucks for the oil field, A-frames they called them, before you had the hydraulic booms, welding trucks for sale. Fortunate for me, I was working long enough that I had a name with people. And they may have not liked me personally, but they knew I could weld. And so they were looking for a welder first and a best buddy later. So that helped you a lot. But even that didn't fix everything. We went through some hard times. I mean, you want to have trouble in a marriage, buddy? You get where you don't have a job. And I remember one time, a friend and I, we went, we got like 1:30 in the morning. I went all the way over from, I live just outside of New Orleans. We went all the way to the Texas line, came back around through Morgan City, Houma, Louisiana, the oil field towns. I got told no 15 times that day. And I came home feeling like I was about this high. And I walked in the door and my wife said, "Did you find a job today?" I said, "No." And just literally like this says, "Well, what are we going to do? You're supposed to be running this show." I said, "I really don't know." So I've been down to the bottom. I've been on jobs making 10 grand a week. That's an exception at the top. And I've been on jobs where I didn't have a job. And it's tough. So you got to have a good name. And whether they like you personally or not, when I was a welder foreman, I hired guys I didn't particularly care for, but I was hiring friends. I was hiring welders first. And then if they were a good person, that was icing on the cake.
That's a bonus, yeah.
The bonus.
Yeah. Man, that's cool.
But it was hard. It was terrible. It was
Yeah.
really terrible.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Strong Hand Tools. They just released some new additions to my favorite table, the Rhino Cart. The new versions include a 4-foot by 3-foot hydraulic lift table, a 4-foot by 4-foot version, and a new 5x3 version for those bigger jobs. They also released a new E-lift turntable that's 30 inches by 30 inches and can hold up to 660 pounds, spin 360 degrees, and is electric hydraulic powered for ease of use. All these new products and more are available on sale right now at stronghandtools.com/promo. Get a sweet discount and free shipping before this promo ends on September 30th. There's never been a better time to join the Strong Hand family. We're also brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking to get into welding? Maybe you need to upgrade your current setup. Or possibly you need a better machine to turn that side hustle into a full-time gig. Look no further than Everlast Welders. They have a machine for every skill level and budget. My personal favorite is the Lightning MTS 275, a true multi-process machine that allows you to run stick, MIG, TIG, both AC and DC, flux core, and has spool gun capabilities. This machine is a beast. Check out the full line of multi-process machines and more at everlastwelders.com. And be sure to use Arc Junkies in the comment section at checkout to get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch when you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. Now let's get back to the show. I couldn't even imagine. The whole time I've been through, I guess 2007, there was a bit of a recession. I knew a lot of people that were getting laid off from their jobs and everything. But like you said, your work, your reputation, that's what kept me busy that whole time. The company that I was working for, literally every week, they had a couple hundred employees every week. They were stopping by the job site to drop off paychecks. And for some of the guys, it was their last check. It got to the point where, as a supervisor, I had to put my tool belt back on and get back out and start working like a working supervisor, which didn't have to do that before. I had an entire crew to manage. But now, I'm back out there on my tools, getting the work done with them. And the boss man, he walks up, he says, "Jason, what are you going to do if I have to come and bring you your last check?" And I looked at him dead in the eye. I said, "Arno," I said, "just do me a favor." I said, "Do it on a Thursday." He said, "Well, why is that?" And I said, "Well, that way Friday I can look for a job, and by Monday I'll be back to work." He says, "You think you can find a job that fast?" I said, "I was looking for one when I found y'all."
There it is.
But at that point, and you look back during the whole pandemic and everything that we had people were labeled as an essential worker. Welding is a craft that it's needed everywhere. So if one sector dries up, you can take that passion, or you can take that skill, that profession, and you can transfer that into a different industry. You're just putting beads on different materials, different positions now. And that's why I try to drive home the fact that you don't want to be a one-trick pony. You want to be able to run stick, MIG, TIG, flux core, learn all these processes. You don't have to like them. You don't have to be good at them. Just be good enough at everything. And then identify with one process that'll get you into the industry that you need. But if that industry dries up, the work goes away, your bills, you still have to pay those. So make sure you've got a second skill set that's easily transferable into another industry.
Or you got a wife with a good job. It's kind of a joke in the pipeline business.
Yeah.
Is marry a pretty woman that has a good job. So it's kind of true. It's sad, but sometimes it can be true. The other thing is, we've gotten so soft in this country, and I'm going to do a series of videos about that. Why can't you find people in the trades anymore? I hear this discussion all the time. And nobody said it out loud, so I'm going to say it. Whether I'm right or wrong, it's what I believe. It's because there's not very many manly men left in this country. Mm-hmm. And my generation, divorce, single moms trying to raise boys. Moms can't raise boys generally, not generally. Little warriors need a big warrior in the house, and so they need somebody showing them how to do things, making them work. We've raised a generation where you just want to placate them, and they watch video games, and they watch Oh, I can't even think of it. But they're doing that. And then the society, the medias and things, and I think it's not by accident. They've been effeminizing this rhetoric and things like that. They'll move on the same issue around the world at the same time. So the point is, the trades have always been the manly trades. I call them manly. People that came out here and came west, California, they had to be tough guys. They knew how to build their own houses. They knew how to do this, knew how to do that. And in time now, we don't know that. So the pool of what I call manly men is shrinking. It is. The testosterone level is down almost 50% in 50 years. I was stunned by that. Last week, I'm looking at an ad I did not know existed, Jason. Now, you're a young guy. You may know this. And I'm not a social media guy. I'm not a big guy like that. But I found this out, and it was stunning. They are selling a product called Hims, and it is Viagra for 30-year-olds. I would have never dreamed in my life at 30-year-olds somebody's trying to get these pills. But it's true. I researched it some more, and it's true. Yeah, it's getting to be a problem.
Yeah, there was a scientific study about that. What is it? 30-year-olds have the same testosterone as like a 50-year-old man back in like 1960, 1970. Something to that effect.
You're probably right. I didn't look at that study, but that's generally, we're both correct. It's down. And then you're raised in homes where there's not a dad. You're raised in a society where we're all on computers. We stay indoors and play. I mean, imagine when I was a boy, if I'd been riding down the street on a bike with a helmet, I'd have been beat up before I got to the end of the block.
That's a fact. I didn't know they made bicycle helmets when I was a kid.
I mean, literally be like, hey, you idiot, what are you doing?
Even if you had a dirt bike.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I bought a four-wheeler. The guy's like, well, do you need a helmet? And I was like, for what? But no, I mean, now, yes, especially going to the different mud parks and everything. I watched a video. My buddy, I guess one of his friends caught it on GoPro cam. Two guys were going. One guy was going the wrong way down a trail, and they met. And luckily, both of them were wearing helmets, but they collided head first. Both of them right up over the top of the handlebars. But I mean, back in the 80s, 90s when I grew up, we didn't have all that.
No, and your bicycle had a bar down the middle, and if you fell off of it the wrong way, guess what?
You were singing soprano,
didn't you? Yeah, and everybody did it. But sooner or later, and that's how you learn you didn't want to do it again.
Yeah, it was a different time back then. I mean, I'd leave the house, especially on summer break and everything. I'd leave the house in the morning, and I might check back in for lunch, but by the time the street light came on, I better be in the house. And that's just to check in, make sure mom would check on me and everything, make sure everything was good, get something to eat. Okay, I'm going to go back outside and play. I could stay within earshot at that point,
There you go. So I'm joking, but I'm not joking. I think the pool of those kind of boys that are raised in the right homes is shrinking, and that's why you're having a hard time. Everybody's out here talking about this subject. Well, why won't they come? Because they get their hands dirty. I used to think that, but I think that it's as much the other as well. When I was in Western Welding, I bumped shoulders with probably, I don't know, there's probably 500 students in the school around the shifts, and I'd bump into my day shift and a bunch of other kids. And you know who the ones that did the best? And most of them were kids that hunt, they fish, their uncles, even if they don't have a dad. They come from that, what I call manly background. They're mechanics. They like to go buy them an old truck and work on them. They're not from the video game side.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm seeing who's attracted to the trades naturally, where you don't have to fuss, you don't have to raise the money, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think we were talking about that prior to the show. Is when I got into education, I took a lot of things for granted, like the ability to read a tape measure, the ability to operate basic hand tools. I'm talking basic hand tools. Like a boxed end wrench, a screwdriver, things like that. Let alone power tools. And so I'd give people a task and say, "Hey, go handle this," and then I'd check back on them 20 minutes later. I was like, "You haven't even figured out which end of the drill to use. What's going on here?" Well, I've never used one of these before. I was like, dude, you're 20 years old. How have you not? Yes, and then it dawned on me. I was like, they had a completely different upbringing. Like you said, they've been playing video games a lot, or Pokemon, or all the, catching Pokemon and all this other stuff. They didn't build and fix things like we did back in the day. I mean, if something broke, you fixed it. You didn't just go out and buy a new one. I mean, we didn't live in a society where you just replace stuff. You had to fix it. And you learned how to use power tools and hand tools, and you get in trouble for borrowing stuff out of your dad's toolbox and everything, because everything's put back just so, and so he'd know you'd been in there. But I mean, I encouraged my kids to do that. I was like, hey, where everything's at. Here's how to use it. Just make sure you put it back. And every once in a while, I'll find some of my tools floating around the house. I'm like, how did how did this get in here? This is supposed to be on the third shelf on the right-hand side of the drawer. Like, where'd this come from? But a lot of kids don't have that nowadays.
No, they don't have the person for whatever the reasons are. I mean, every family's got people that have been on drugs. I got a stepson that's been on drugs forever. We get excited. He gets off. He gets back. It's been this ongoing heartbreak in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could care less about the war that's overseas right now. I'd rather send 82nd Airborne bouncing out of planes down in Central and South America where the drugs are, where they look like leaves falling off a tree, because I think that's what's been killing this country a long time. Way worse, but that's Gerald, and I'm an odd duck. Okay. And to your point about the tools, here 3 or 4 weeks ago, I took my youngest grandson, and we had a boy date, and we went down to Lowe's, and I bought him his own toolbox, and we went through there, and he got to pick his tools, and he was ecstatic, Jason. That's all he talked about. He went down and had his own tools. So today you have to look for things like that, because we live in subdivisions. Somebody cuts the grass. But I very much agree with you on that.
Now, do you, like with your, I'm not sure, because you're out in California, right?
Yes, sir.
So check with your, or whatever your home state is, check with your local Lowe's and Home Depot, because a lot of times they'll do the kids' workshops, and they'll build like, everybody gets a little kit, and they get a hammer and an apron and all that stuff. I'm talking like young kids. I took my kids out there when probably between the ages of 6 and 8, and they got to build all kinds of stuff, little race cars, a little easel, and, a dump truck and birdhouses and all this other stuff. But it gets them out on a Saturday, building something, working with your hands, seeing some of the cool stuff you're actually able to do. And, I drag my kid around the house. If I got to fix something, he's in there playing on his, because my kid plays computer. Yeah, he's into that. His friends are all into it. But if I got to fix something around the house, I'm like, hey, shut that off, grab the flashlight. Come on, you're coming with me. And we go fix some stuff around the house, because I don't want him to be dependent on, this is broken, I got to call somebody, or I got to buy a whole new one. I was like, no, the washing machine goes out. Nope, we're getting on there. We're pulling up a schematic. We're going to buy all the replacement parts. And that's what we're doing this Saturday. So don't stay up too late Friday night, because Saturday morning you're going to come out there and we're going to disassemble that washer. We're not done until Mama throws that load of clothes in there and she can wash it without that thing herking and jerking all over the place.
No, you're doing a good job then, Jason. I'm glad to hear that.
I'm trying,
you're doing a good job. But that's all we can do is try.
Yeah.
You got to fight against the tide that's happening today. It's circling. It's like 360 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So, you got to improvise.
Yeah, improvise, adapt, and overcome.
There it is.
Now, what caused you to get into education? Because I know you taught over at Western for about a year or two. What was it that made you decide to get into that industry?
Providence. I was on my jobs. I always taught helpers, because I enjoyed it. It's part of my gifts, or whoever you're made to be. And I seemed to have a talent for it, to be able to explain it to them. And one helper would break out, another one would want to come. Mr. Gerald, can you show me something? And on pipelines, you work 6 days a week. Sunday's your day off. But helpers that want to learn how to weld, if they're good helpers, a lot of times the superintendent will let them go to the yard. And they may have bought a weld machine and have it in their old truck, and they'll go down there and barbecue. And so I'd go down there and hang out with them a while, or I'd leave my truck and let them use the machine. So that was kind of my history along through the years. I just liked doing it. And I never owned a welding school. I had 3 friends that have had them, so I knew a little bit about them, and they would try to get me to come teach. Well, in welding schools, the trouble is, if you know how to weld, you're not going to make welding school money, because it's just not the same as being out on construction. I don't care. It's just how it is. Mm-hmm. So that's that dilemma that all schools find themselves in. You can have instructors that are booth babies, and you probably know, but a booth baby is like somebody that gets out of school, and that's how he learned to weld, and he never went off in the real world and worked. He just teaches from the school, and they can be talented. I know a young man right now I'm thinking about. He went through a school and was very talented, and he has a gift to teach. That's the main thing. Mm-hmm. You don't have to have worked on these jobs for 40 years to know how to weld, but you need to have a gift to do it. So this young man was talented. He was an exception, and he was gifted to teach, and the students loved this guy. So that's kind of the problem right here in this business a little bit with that.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of teachers out there that can't weld and a lot of welders out there that can't teach. So you got to find somebody that can actually do both. I didn't think I was able to do both. And you hear that old adage, those that can't do, teach. But like when I was in their teaching, like I had to be able to do it, to be able to demonstrate to these students, this is how you do it. This is, how you avoid these mistakes. Okay, you got porosity. Okay, here's the problem. And then watch here, I'll run a demo. Watch how I do it. And then be able to literally, when I teach my students, I literally grab them by the hands and I walk their hands around. This is what it should feel like. That's how my teacher taught me. You got to be able to feel what's going on in that welding rod at the end of the rod, especially like when I teach stick welding. I was like, I call it welding by braille. You put that rod in there, you should be able to feel that rod getting shorter, tying in, melting, flowing, like all that stuff. But there's a lot of people out there that they can do it. They've got the skill set. They're really good welders, but they can't figure out a way to convey that information to somebody else.
No, you're exactly right. And I don't want to embarrass you again, but you have a gift to teach. If anybody has any brain, they can see that. I saw that the first video I saw of you. Weld.com, and I'd be scrolling through there looking for stuff to show my students, or on some point get a different view. A lot of times, to your point as well, I was looking for somebody doing it wrong, because when you show somebody how it's done wrong, they've got it forever. Yep. And then you can build sometimes. All right, but I found you, and you're gifted to do that, and that's just rare. It's rare that you do that. Now, when I started welding offshore, when I kind of decided, okay, I'm gonna learn how to weld. On the offshore platforms, it'd be just like living in a refinery on a shutdown. All the pipes there at night on the deck outside where you stay at, one deck below, the welding machines, everything's there, the table. So I started going out at night, and they would send pipe out that was prefabricated, and they always add like 6 inches. Nothing's perfect on a print. And the fitters, my superintendent said, save those pieces, those pups off of that for this young man right here. So I'd go out there at night and weld. There was about 4 guys that would teach me to weld, and they were tired. They wouldn't come out there and hang out forever. Somebody'd come by this night and say this and that. All 4 of these guys, Jason, were good welders. I mean, I wouldn't have been ashamed of any of them, nowhere. But one of them absolutely could not teach you what he knew. And this guy would come around, it almost like they kind of felt like it was their turn. So he'd come out in his flip-flops and his shorts after supper, and I'd be out there welding. I'm tired too after being in that humidity all day. And he'd be telling me what to do. And you know what I was thinking when I saw him coming? Come over here, confuse me, and then go away so I can go back to doing what I already know. And that's what you'll do. That's what your students will do. Mm-hmm. If you don't have a gift to teach, they're going to listen to you, and you're going to say, you understand that, son? They're going to like, yeah. Yep. And they don't.
Whether they do or not. They're just going to be like, oh, yeah, I got it.
Yeah, I got it. And they're going to go away, and it's going to go back to what they last knew and felt comfortable with.
Yeah.
Because it's an eye-hand coordinated skill. Us guys have to feel good about something. So wherever we do that looks a little pretty to us, we don't want somebody telling us to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, kind of like that.
Now, when you're out in the field, because I mean, it is a manly trade. Did you ever weld with any female welders?
No. I never saw a female first female I saw on a job was offshore, and it was a lady that was a cook for a catering company, and she was kind of like late 50s, which is really nice because when you're around a bunch of guys all the time, I get tired of hearing guys. It was nice to hear this feminine voice. And she'd chew our hide. I mean, you come in there with them caps and hats on, buddy, she'd strip you right when you came in. Like, get them caps off, get them covers off. And, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. It was really nice. And then later on, I think I was working for Exxon, and they brought a couple of girls out that worked on day shift, night shift. Offshore is 2 12-hour shifts. That's how they do it. And it's kind of amazing what it does to guys. I mean, she wasn't unattractive, but she wasn't like Miss America. But it's amazing the effect it has on guys. And everybody started combing their hair and acting different. And we had trouble because everybody wanted to stop and talk to her, and she didn't want to soak up the attention. So that caused a little problems. But it was some years later before I actually saw it, like out on pipelines and things like that. And now it's pretty common.
Yeah. Now, when you taught at the school, did you teach females?
Yes, I did. I had. They weren't the majority for sure, but
no, definitely not.
I'd say maybe 10%. And one of the young lady, I just texted her the other day, Carla, and she won the little welding competition here a few months back. And little bitty Spanish girl, and she did an excellent job. So yeah.
I was gonna say, because they'll surprise you. When I first started teaching females, I was like, I'd let them know you're entering a male-dominated industry, and you're going to have to prove yourself every single day, and they know it coming in. I mean, and that's why I think they tend to work a lot harder than a lot of the guys that I had in my class. And then next thing I know, man, I turn around, it's like mom's in the building, you know? I mean, she's got them all straight and in line and everything, and they're all like literally hot on her feet trying to keep up with all the certs that she's cranking out because she had the ability to follow directions, and the hand-eye coordination was just unbelievable. I think
that left brain, right brain thing, you see it when you get in that TIG welding with them, don't you?
The first time I ever seen a female welder, I was in high school. I was in a welding school, and my welding instructor's sister was a deaf TIG welder, and she would lay down some of the most beautiful welds at the time, you know, like I had ever seen. I mean, these were like textbook perfect. She could outweld him. She couldn't. She was completely deaf, and she made welding caps in her spare time. But she was really good. I mean, to have that disability back, I mean, we're talking like 97, 98, somewhere in that area. I mean, she was doing freaking awesome with it.
Oh, yeah, that amazes me. I've seen several of them come through there. And I used to watch my students because there's 4 basic personality types, and then there's variations of that. And you can get into the weeds where they say there's 16, corporations do all that. And so because of my background, I've always been interested in that. And I would watch who comes in, watch their body language, talk to them a little bit. And I got to where I could probably about 85, 90% just know who was going to like what. I'd say, well, which type welding do you like the most of? And so, well, I like this one. And you can tell by their personalities after a while. You can tell different things. But those girls have that left brain, right brain thing. And they don't like getting burned up unless they're, really special in a way that not normal to women. They prefer the TIG, and they're just really good at it.
Yeah, they do seem to gravitate towards the TIG really well.
Yes, sir, they do. That's what I found. TIG welding was what their specialty was.
Yeah. Now, when you were out there teaching, did you enjoy teaching?
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did more classroom than outside, but I would stay late, and in their training, the downhill welding was kind of the last part at the end. And outside, they had the bigger pipe set up. And so these guys would go out there when it got to the downhill. And I would go out there with them, and I'd get so excited about it, I'd forget to go home for supper. And a lot of times I stayed till midnight till the next shift came up.
Oh, wow.
Because I so enjoyed it. And they're so hungry, Jason. You've seen that. When you get a good student, what would you not do for a good student, Jason?
Oh, man, I've come in on weekends and stayed late. I mean, a lot of them, even if I didn't want to, or it was an inconvenience, if they took the time out of their day to show up, I'd drop what I was doing. I've got this, especially, because we would teach Monday through Thursday. Friday was like office hours, or, that's when I got time to grade papers and, order material and inventory and, do all that stuff. But if I had students that came in on a Friday, no matter what it was, I'd drop what I was doing, grab my hood. All right, let's get into the booth. Let's work on it. You're here to put in extra time. I'm going to give you extra time.
There it is. And so you know what I'm saying. It's not something somebody can pay you to do. It's not about the money. I mean, everybody's got to make enough money to live, and that's a reality in this world. And for some people, it's probably a mix. Okay, it's a steady job. I'm not traveling on the road. And there's a lot of reasons why guys take instructor jobs, and there's nothing evil about it. But I think the biggest one is you have to really like to teach young men. And I'm a Christian. The Bible says older men are supposed to teach younger men. That's the model. And it's broken down over my generation, divorce, this, that, and the other. And so when I find these country boys and they want to know everything, and they're willing to stay, they'll tell me, Mr. Gerald, can you stay a little while on the second shift? Because they've got room here in a booth, and they'll let me stay over. And I'll say, yes, sir, we'll stay here. And some of the most rewarding times in my life when I see people that want to. Now, when you see somebody that doesn't want to, I've had a few of them too. And I told them, I said, you know what I want to do when you guys really do right? I said, I want to help you. I said, I want to take you home and adopt you if you don't eat too much. I said, when you're not, I said, I want to trip you, and I want to watch you fall and hit your face on that concrete over there. I said, oh, Mr. Gerald. I said, yeah, oh, Mr. Gerald. But that's how it is. If you do right, it's in us older men to want to help you. It's like a mother nurturing a child, and we don't talk about things like that. But it is. I think it's something that was put in there from the factory.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time putting foot to butt as well, because I see the potential in some of them. They don't see it themselves. And it's like, if you could get out of your own way, you could do this. I just need you, just meet me halfway. And some of them, they're just not, they're not mature enough at that point, or, they got some other issues that they got to get through. But, like there's been some of them I've been able to turn around. Like they come in there and it's like, they obviously don't have the want to, or that they can't right now or whatever. And you just kind of keep working with them. And some of them will spin around. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some of them that, you could take a horse to water. You can't make them drink. There's some people you just can't reach, and they're going to have to figure it out on their own. I've had a couple students, they drop out and then they come back, when they get a little bit more of that maturity going. And then it's like working with a completely different person. Whatever issues they were having, they were able to overcome that obstacle. Now they can actually focus on what they need to do.
Well, you'll understand this when I say it, and it wasn't something I got so smart to think about. I was in a class one day, and I'm kind of watching the body language, and we were talking about it. I do a thing in class called life lessons as well, and I never know where it's going to go. It just kind of comes up, and I had a little bit of freedom if I was on track, and I could do some things. And one day I had a class, and I just sensed something, and this was pretty interesting. I said, right now, I'm fixing to tell you guys some things. I don't want you to raise your hand. I don't want you to say one word. I want you to just think in your heart for a minute. I said, right now, some of you guys in here and you girls have somebody or something in your life that's keeping you from doing your best here. It can be friends that want to party all night and drink, and you're coming in here too tired to do anything. It could be that they are a stronger personality, and that happens in life, in high school and whatever, and you just can't tell them no. Or it could be a situation. It could be a boyfriend, a girlfriend, and they're just not right for you, and you really know it. I said, but right now, while I'm looking at you, I said, what is in your way that's keeping you from being a success? I said, because you do know at your age that right now, the woman you're going to fall in love with, or the man you're going to fall in with and marry, that person's livelihood, the quality of their life, the neighborhood they're going to live in, the kind of car they're going to drive. Children that have not even come out of your body are depending on what you're going to do right here. And I said, it's only 6 months. I said, is there anybody in your life like that? I had 80% of them look down at the table, and they knew. And some of them would look at me like this and shake their head. So a lot of times it's like that when you're that young still. You want to do what's right. You're excited. You're rooming or hanging out with people that don't. And it's a holdback. And somewhere you gotta decide, okay, hey, I'm going for this.
That's a great way to put it into perspective for people. I've never even thought about it at that level before.
Yeah, that's your family. That's what I told them. I said, you got boys and girls that haven't even been born to you yet. And the quality of their life is depending on whether you screw off right here or not. And I told them, I said, I had an old redneck aunt, and I did. Great aunt, and she used to dip Levi Garrett snuff. You familiar with that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, she loved us kids. We'd come to visit, and we'd run like field mice trying to get away from that nasty old gal. She used to have the old can by the chair to spit in. And she used to have a saying. She said, I'm so tough I can hold a snuff box over a bear's butt for an hour. And they started laughing. I said, if Aunt Hazel can hold that snuff box for an hour, I said, you guys ought to be able to come in here and weld for 6 months without screwing up too bad. And they said, yes, sir. I said, all right. So you got to decide.
Yeah. So if you had one piece of information to share with the listeners of the podcast, or one words of wisdom, what do you think that would be?
Well, you probably know this. I think you're pretty well read. And like I said, I like psychology. I like learning things. Do you know I've watched this for 30 years, Jason? Do you know how many men or women now? Used to it was men, predominantly in this country, men worked. You know how many of them really like what they do for a living? You ever seen any of the stats?
I've never seen the stats, but I'd probably say maybe 10%.
Well, you're it could be lower than that, but I looked at it here a few months back, and it depends on where you go. For several decades, it stayed around 25-30% that would say when they were surveyed. Now, how true is that? But it gives you an idea. It gives you a parameter. They're happy. Most men and women do not like their job. You're seeing right now all these jobs going wanting. There's a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. A lot of it can be character, whatever, social programs, but they don't like what they're doing. And when I was a boy, this is kind of how it went. This is years ago now. You get a job if you're a boy in high school, so you can get a girl, right? Got to have a car if you're going to be true enough to get a girl. You get a girl, and you fall in love, and my goodness, you are overwhelmed with the way girls smell and the whole bit. You start fooling around, and you want to get married. You go to mom and dad back then, and the dad's like, are you insane? Are you absolutely insane? You're 17, you want to marry my daughter? I don't think so. Well, then you fool around long enough back then, and somebody gets pregnant. Well, then he's pretty happy you're going to marry her. because that was a shame back then, especially in small towns.
Mm-hmm.
So you fix that problem. Well, the guys are all happy because you got this girl you love and you're having sex now with this person you love. And you don't care if you live in a one-bedroom apartment that's 20 stories up. And you're just happy. And you get a job. How do you get a job? Well, Uncle Fred knows Bill at a place that Bob knows some friend, and they're hiring at the widget factory. So you go to work in the widget factory. But after the second kid comes, and about 3 years in, it's not so much fun working at the widget factory anymore, but you're trapped. And that went on a lot. But you're man enough, you stay and pay the bills. And so you advance in this job slowly that you don't like. And that's not that way today because it's different times and people do different things when that situation happens. But if you get my point, I think there's a lot of that still goes on. I see these young people, they're working at McDonald's and they're going to party every weekend. And they're making enough money. They're living at mom and dad's house and they're partying. Well, then maybe they go to work at some big box store and they're doing a little better. And most people live together today. They don't get married. And if you can't find somebody you like better after a while, well, let's get married. Okay, we get married. And that doesn't work in a couple of years. Same situation, right? A little bit different route. 2 kids. And now I got to make some more money. You get divorced. I got to have some money. I got to pay this child support. And then I go get married again. And so you have these people in jobs they never chose. And you got to find the job that you're made for. I believe that we're made for different tasks. It doesn't mean you only have one. But when you can find what you're made to do, what you're gifted to do, like you're gifted to do what you do, okay? I believe that with all my heart. And you're a pretty happy guy. I watch your body language, okay? You're pretty happy at what you do. So if you're in a job you don't like, you are miserable as a man. Most men get their sense of worth from what they do. That's who they are. Mm-hmm. Women mostly get their sense of worth from relationships. And so that's why there's a lot of unhappy men around. And to their credit, I had students like that. And he said, oh, my dad was like that. And he told me that. He said, don't screw off. He said, I've stayed here all these years and not had a job I like. I want you to do better than me. I believe there's some truth to that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, my dad did the same thing to me, but he thought, me going to college was going to make me happier, set me on a better trajectory. That wasn't the case. But, I mean, there's a video that I refer back to. I refer a lot of people to it. There's a guy by the name of Elliot Hulse. And so somebody put this video together. It's Elliot Hulse, Joe Rogan, and Alan Watts. And it's called What's Your Passion? And it's 3 different perspectives on essentially like finding your passion. Don't do a job for the money. I mean, especially don't get yourself into a situation where you have to go to work and like you're pigeonholed into that job and you can't leave and break out. Like, figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what makes you happy, and then do that. And you're going to find a way to make money at that. The money's eventually going to come. A lot of people say, do what you love. You'll never work a day in your life. I think that's kind of a misconception. You're going to have to work regardless. But I have fun while I work. When I was out doing ironwork, I loved the work. And the people that, I had around me, that was a bonus. Like you said, it was icing on the cake. When I got into education, I actually loved doing the work. The students around me that, they get that eureka moment where it finally clicks and, now they're laying down good welds or they pass a certification plate or, they make an achievement in class. I kind of fed off that, now that I'm doing the podcast and, running my own school and doing my own inspections and stuff. I like working with, the different clients. It's still work. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot more work doing it by myself than it was when I could just punch in and punch out, 40 hours a week, a little bit of overtime here and there. It's a lot more work doing it on my own, but I enjoy the work. So, I mean, you still got to work, but enjoy what you do. So if you know that you want to get into welding, if you're in welding school listening to this right now, Gerald, like you said, you're here, for 6 months, give it all you got, cut all the dead ends off and everything. Focus on this for 6 months because it's going to launch you into a career where you can not only be happy, but you can make a good living. And if welding's not for you, drop out right now and go find what it is that's going to make you happy.
Yeah, because when you're young, you have time. You see, at my age, when I make decisions now, I probably worry over more than I ever have because I don't have the same time left that I did when you're young. When you're 18, 19, 20 years old, man, if you think you want to do it, go for it.
Yeah.
Fortune favors the bold. It just does. There's something in this universe that likes when people are bold. I don't mean stupid and reckless, like when we're 18 and you got more testosterone, you got sense. I've been there and done that, right? Mm-hmm. Your friends are like, hey, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's do something stupid, get hurt, and go to the emergency room.
Emergency room.
But to your point, and I'll get off here for you. I had a friend in high school, and we moved a lot, different towns, and he was a photographer, and he wasn't a jock. He wasn't a wussy guy. He just liked photography, school paper. He would do those things. And I saw him probably 10 years after I got out of high school. I pulled into a hamburger joint in his town, and he was parked there. So we started talking, and he's asked me, what have you been doing? What have you been doing? This is what he told me. He said, I have my own photography studio now. And he said, I've won this award and this award. And I said, do you ever get tired of it? And this is what he told me. He said, I get tired in it, but I never get tired of it. And I said, you are one blessed individual, son.
That's the way to
do
it.
And I am jealous to the max.
No, that's the way to do it. So now you've got some other stuff coming up, Gerald. Where can people find you? I know you've got you're hopping both feet or head first into the social media gig. Where can people find you?
Well, we have different sites. I hired some media people. They're really good because I'm not a media person. I'm not smart enough to do that. And it was Providence, people I ran into. And we were up on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Brighteon, Truth Social, which is more just talking type place. I think a new one is Boomtown. Is that
okay? Boom Nation.
Boom Nation. Okay. Somebody recommended it. But primarily right now, I think you'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And I've been invited to speak on some other podcasts, and I've been invited to go to the AWS thing and do a little speech. I got invited to a college here. So I've been living in Wyoming. I came home to visit because I've been gone for a while. I set the platforms up, and everything. People have been very gracious. The thing has just taken off, and I'm absolutely amazed, really. So I'm just kind of going with the flow. And then we had spoke a little bit, and I had the thought to go to FabTech. And after you talked to me, that's getting to be a pretty solid thing here in my spirit. So I want to thank you for that if it happens, because it would be from you.
Oh, that'd be great, man. Come on out. I mean, you're going to have a blast. It's a good time. I mean, you get to hang out with a lot of other welders and stuff like that. And get, like I said, you get to see all the latest and greatest in the equipment, and it's a good time.
Yeah, I think it would be. So that was like Providence. You I already had that little thought, and you really made it come focused pretty clear on me. So if I show up there, it's going to be your fault.
Okay, I'll take the blame on that one. It becomes a tradition almost. Like I've told some of the people that I get to hang out with every year at FabTech, because we're from all over the place. Social media is what kind of brings us together. But for 4 or 5 days out of the year, every year, we get to meet up in somebody else's town, and it's kind of like a small family reunion. We get to catch up on old times and, get to go out and experience cool new things and play with equipment and have conversations and, after hours. And it's a good deal. It's a good time. It becomes a tradition.
Well, if I get there, I'll be looking forward to meeting you, and we'll see what happens then.
Well, you got my number, sir. I really appreciate you coming out on the podcast, sharing your history. I mean, you're a very smart man, very well-spoken, and I think that's why you're getting, a lot of these opportunities to, come speak on podcasts or different engagements and stuff like that. And I think you've got a lot to give, and that's kind of the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast, is because you've got a lot of people from your generation with that experience. We got to be able to figure out a way to pass that on to the next generation. So your videos that you're doing on Instagram and everything, I think that's truly awesome to be able to document a lot of these stories, that people are going to be able to relate to, or kind of learn from, your mistakes, or learn from some of your successes and wins and all that stuff. So keep doing what you're doing. I really love it. Okay,
Jason, I'm very happy that you're the first podcast I went on, and I'll always remember it, son. Thank you.
I appreciate it, sir.
All right.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation between Gerald and I. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast downloader app so you never miss an episode. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.